All right, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the 5th day of March, 2024. Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Before we get into the game from last night, real quick programming note. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're going to have an exclusive one-on-one conversation with Flyers prospect who just signed his entry-level contract from the London Knights, Denver Barkey. And I will just tell you this. A lot of times when I'm going to do an interview or have a conversation with a very young player in Denver, I think he'll be 19 coming up in April. A lot of times I'll kind of allot myself 6 or 7 minutes for those conversations. Young guys aren't as comfortable as some maybe more seasoned veteran players. I'll tell you, this conversation went on for 15, 20. And he gave great, insightful responses, and we had a really nice conversation. And you'll hear that coming up on tomorrow's episode. And also, obviously, this week, programming note, we have the trade deadline coming up on Friday, and it's going to be a busy week of Flyers hockey. Even though there's not games for the next 2 days, the Flyers will be back Thursday in Florida to take on the Panthers and Saturday to take on Tampa. In the middle of that sandwich of the Florida two-step will be the NHL trade deadline. So it should be a very intriguing week as well. And we'll get to a lot of different topics of conversation this week also. Now, to the game from last night. Flyers fell in the shootout to the St. Louis Blues. Final score in that game of 2-1 in what was, on both sides, I thought, an incredibly well goaltended game. Flyers had 41 shots on Jordan Binnington. The Blues had 25 shots on Sam Ersson. And for my money, you look at 66 total shots in the game. Only 2 goals scored with the exception of the shootout. And I thought it was just a really well goaltended game. And I know John Tortorella said after the game that he looked over at one of his assistant coaches in that maybe it was even the second period, said he's not going to give up another one. And then he looked at the other end and looked at Ersson and said he's probably not going to give up another one. It was probably in the third period because St. Louis scored pretty late in the second period. And I felt the same way watching that game, just watching both goaltenders on it, making difficult saves, making obviously the routine saves, and both goals that were scored in regulation in the game, I think were from about a combined 3.5 feet from the net. Combined. They were just right on the doorstep, both of them. So really well goaltended game. We'll talk more about that in a second. But the particulars, like I said, Flyers outshoot St. Louis 41-25. Scott Laughton picks up the opening goal of the game, 18:52 into the first period. And it's his 10th of the season. This is a weird off-the-rush goal because it's really about crashing the net. A lot of times off-the-rush goals, a 2-on-1 odd man rush is more about making that pass and the guy that receives the pass having the goalie moving side to side and just beating him. But Scott Laughton just drives the net hard because Ryan Poehling really waits out the St. Louis Blues defender and then is able to kind of dip around him and then get that pass to the goal mouth. And Laughton is just crashing the net, and it ends up in the back of the net. He's half in the back of the net as well. And it puts the Flyers up 1-0 in the game. Poehling with the assist. Really nice play by him. Sanheim picks up an assist as well. And Scott Laughton, who's been piping hot of late, he was really off to kind of a slow start, especially when it came to goal scoring this season. But he has really picked up the offensive pace. He went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games without a point. And that led him all the way up into the Winnipeg game on the 8th of February. But since then, here's Scott Laughton's numbers now in the 11 games since. He's got 5 goals, 7 assists for 12 points in those 11 games and is a plus 13 or plus 14 now, over that period of time, playing over 16 minutes of ice time. And while we talked about Tyson Foerster in yesterday's episode and the development of a young player and affecting games on the score sheet, scoring goals since he's been back, and the thing you like, it's a young player developing, but the thing you like about it, maybe even more, is that it's a young player developing and being consequential when the games mean the most, when you're in this playoff push here in March, where there's not a lot of margin for error. Same thing with Scott Laughton. He has risen the level of his game to a pretty high degree. And to have the 5 goals and 7 assists and 12 points over his last 11 games, Pretty darn impressive play out of him. We know he's the spiritual leader of this team, and he gets the Flyers on the board there to make it 1-0. Head to the second period, a little bit of back and forth. St. Louis has maybe a little bit more of the play, carrying more of the play in that second period. They outshot the Flyers in the period. Finally, they get on the board when kind of Kevin Hayes gets tangled up, I think, with Travis Sanheim behind the play. And then the turnover happens in the neutral zone, and it's Hayes who goes in on the breakaway. And the thing about this goal is I don't think there's anything Sam Ersson could have done or done differently. Hayes goes in, makes a couple of deke moves, goes to pull the puck to his forehand, and it rolls off his stick, never gets to his forehand, but rolls right through the wickets of Sam Ersson. Ersson's pushing from his right to his left where Kevin Hayes is trying to go. But when the puck rolls off his stick and just ends up sliding through his 5-hole, there's nothing the goalie can do. You can't plan for that. And you say, well, close the 5-hole. Well, how's he going to push from his right to his left if the 5-hole doesn't open a little bit? And that was the full intention of what Kevin Hayes tried to do. And he picks up his 11th goal of the season. Of course, a former Flyer gets a goal against the Flyers. Kasperi Kapanen picks up the assist, and that ties the game at 1. Go into the third period. Both goaltenders, excellent in the third period. Matter of fact, Sam Ersson made a save in the third period, a couple of them, real big ones. But there was a huge one on Pavel Buchnevich in the first period where Ersson is literally on his stomach and facing the wall this way to his left. And then the puck ends up on the right side, and he's got to swing his, mind you, laying down on his stomach, swing his left leg out behind him to make the save. It was unbelievable. And then we get into the overtime. First couple minutes of the overtime, St. Louis owned the puck. Flyers hit a crossbar. Cam York did in the overtime. And we had to do the shootout. And you're feeling pretty good. You got Sam Ersson in the shootout. He's been excellent in the shootout all season long. And you saw it real pronounced again when a shootout player comes in on Ersson, how much ice he comes out and takes and then flows back with them. So shootout opens. Sean Couturier, who I didn't think played a shift in the 5-on-5 overtime, and only played just over 12 minutes in the game. So clearly his minutes are still way down. He was centering that fourth line with Ule Lexell and Bobby Brink. And the puck just rolls on him on some tired ice at that point, and he doesn't even get a shot off. Then Robert Thomas comes in on Sam Ersson. He makes the save. Tyson Forcer on Jordan Binnington. Binnington makes the save. Then Jake Neighbors beats Sam Ersson, and it puts the St. Louis Blues a save away from winning the game. But Morgan Frost goes in, and I think he kind of flirts again with almost moving backwards, but he keeps a little bit of momentum moving forward. He's able to beat Jordan Binnington. That ties it at 1. Then Braden Shen, saved by Ersson. Owen Tippett just missed the net. And then Pavel Buchnevich, a chance to win it, and he does. He gets the backhand by Ersson, and the St. Louis Blues skate off with the 2 points and a 2-1 win over the Philadelphia Flyers. And the really important points for St. Louis as well. They're 7 points back, a couple games in hand of a wild card spot in the Western Conference. But the Flyers, obviously, points just as important right now, even though St. Louis is trying to get where the Flyers are into the playoff positioning. Flyers are in that playoff positioning and trying to maintain it while you've got this chase group chasing them from behind. They didn't do themselves any favors a couple of days ago when Pittsburgh, Washington, and New Jersey all lost. None of those teams in action last night. But it's getting tight. It's getting really tight. Flyers grabbed the point. They moved to 72 points now on the season through 63 games. And here's the sheer math of the equation. And you look, like I said, Flyers 72 points, sitting in the third spot. The New York Islanders, who've won 3 straight games, have 66 points. So they're 6 points back of the Flyers, but they have 3 games in hand. So if all 3 of those games were wins, which I'm not going to hand them to them, that would be 6 points, and they'd be tied with the Flyers. Again, that's if they're wins, or if you have, an overtime loss in there, it's only 1 point, but we'll see how that plays out. So that's the team right behind the Flyers, the 4th place team in the Metro. Then you have the Washington Capitals, who've also only played 60 games, so 3 games in hand, but they're 7 points back of the Flyers. And then you have the New Jersey Devils, who've played 61 games, 2 less than the Flyers, but they are now 8 points back of the Flyers. And the Penguins have only played 59 games, so they have 4 games in hand, but they're 10 points back of the Flyers, and they've lost 3 straight games. They got belted over the weekend by Edmonton. They lost Saturday as well. Washington loses to Anaheim the other day. The Caps lose to Arizona. The team, the real threat here, in my opinion, is the New York Islanders. They've won 3 straight under Patrick Waugh. They're 5-3-2 in their last 10. I think that they're the real threat. We'll see about the Devils now because they fired Lindy Ruff last night. A really late firing with 21 games to go. They can Ruff. I guess his save percentage wasn't good enough. I love when these general managers fire a coach because he hasn't supplied the team with the proper goaltending. That's what it looks like to me there. I'm surprised he got let go, but we'll see where the Devils go from here. Sometimes it takes a little time under a new coach for the team to respond and kind of pick up the system and the changes that a new coach makes and the expectations and everything that goes with it. So we'll see if the Devils have enough runway or if they don't have enough runway. But right now they are sitting, like I said, 8 points back of the Flyers. But clearly they think they're still in it, and maybe they are. The Flyers have to control that destiny, and we'll see if they're able to do that by grabbing the standings points over the next couple of weeks. I mean, there's only, 5 weeks left in the season at this point, 5-6 weeks. And the Flyers right now sit with just 19 games left. But looking at the schedule, boy, there is a murderer's row coming up for the Flyers. Now, this week's deadline. So we'll see what happens coming up by Friday at 3:00. Who's here, who's not here. Is Danny Briere holding to a firm price on guys like Nick Seeler or Sean Walker? They're the pending guys, UFAs. Does a guy like Scott Lawton, who's, like I said, been very hot of late, 11 points in his last 10 games or 12 points in his last 11 games. How does that play out? How does it affect the team? And that's going to be a big part of this for the Flyers. And if they're able to secure that playoff position, we'll see where it goes. Again, like if I'm Danny Briere, I'm listening on everybody, but a guy like Nick Seeler, for example, I don't know that the return is great enough. His value to the Flyers is more than I think the return is worth. And for a guy like Nick Seeler, it's a phone call I wouldn't even be looking forward to taking. They said, general manager, blah, blah, blah is on the phone. The secretary calls in. General manager, blah, blah, blah is on the phone. And he wants to talk about Nick Seeler. I may go, tell him I'm at lunch. I don't even want to talk to him because that's not a guy I want to lose. But I get it. You're in a rebuild. You got to listen on everybody. But that's just my preference. But we'll see where it goes with Walker, where it goes with Lawton, where it goes with any other player that may be being talked about or inquired about from other general managers around the league. But here's the deal. Thursday, before the deadline, you have the Florida Panthers, who are a phenomenal team. Very good team. Very well could be the team that comes out of the Eastern Conference once again and represents them for a battle for the Stanley Cup playoffs against whoever gets there from the West. Florida, really good team. Highest points percentage in the NHL at .710. 42-16-4 on the season. 88 points already. That's who's up on tap coming up on Thursday. Then you have the deadline Friday. Saturday, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning, who Flyers got belted by earlier this season, 6-3. Then they beat them last week, 6-2. But you're going to take them on down now in Tampa. So not an easy game. Then you're going to come home. You're going to get St. Louis, or San Jose, rather. But then there's this murderer's row of schedule coming up. And to me, I always look at those key chunks in the schedule, break it down in a little smaller bite-sized pieces. And it's not as simple as 5 games. It doesn't work like that. But you look at this stretch where they have, starting on March 14th, after the San Jose game, you have Toronto at home, Boston on the road, Toronto at home, Carolina on the road, Boston at home, Florida at home, and then the New York Rangers on the road. Those 7 games from March 14th to March 26th are ginormous. Ginormous. And whether you're going into that stretch with or without Sean Walker, with or without Nick Seeler, with or without Travis Konechny, I think Konechny will be back on Thursday. Practiced yesterday in a non-contact or in a jersey that wasn't a non-contact jersey. So he's moving in the right direction. I think he'll be back on Thursday. And that's good. And you kind of survive the period that he was out of the lineup, and he's the team's MVP, the scariest offensive weapon they have. But all that being said, those 7 games, Toronto, Boston, Toronto, Carolina, Boston, Florida, New York Rangers, that's where it's going to hang. You're going to finish out the month with Montreal and Chicago, but then you have another key chunk coming up because you have the Islanders, and they may be a team that's knocking on your door for that 3rd spot in the Metro. Then it's Buffalo and Columbus and Montreal, and you worry about those teams to some degree because they're playing with house money. There's no pressure. They're just literally playing out the string. They're doing that now, but they're going to do that even more so in April. And then you have the last 3 games. You have the Rangers, a good team. Maybe they'll have everything sewn up and they're resting guys. I don't know. That's on the road. Then you get New Jersey. They might be knocking on the door. And then you get Washington. They might still be knocking on the door for the last game of the year. So you have that stretch there with the Rangers, Jersey, and Washington to wrap it up. But that 7-game stretch after the San Jose game, Toronto, Boston, Toronto, Carolina, Florida, Rangers, is where it sits. And that's after the All-Star break. Does Rasmus Ristolainen come back, for example? Does Jamie Drysdale come back? What is the efficacy of those players if they do come back? If you trade Sean Walker, is Ryan Adder then inserted into the lineup to play alongside Nick Seeler if he's not traded? You have all these imaginations. Do they stick with Felix Sandstrom as the backup, who played well in the game this past weekend? Earned a win, earned another scheduled start when you decide to use the backup. How does that play out? Do the Flyers go out, and if a goalie doesn't make his way to the waiver wire, do you spend a 5th or 6th round draft pick and grab a veteran maybe you feel a little bit better about? How does all this play out? There's a lot of things we don't know, and we may not know until Friday. But the things that we do know, like that 7-game stretch from after the San Jose game, all the way through that Ranger game, we do know. I know that now, that stretch of schedule is no joke. That is a murderer's row in the middle of the month of March, coming down the stretch. Toronto twice, Boston twice, Carolina maybe adding Florida. I mean, you've got some tough opponents there. If they're going to get into the playoffs, and they're in a position now, I'll tell you what, if they get in, they earned it. Because you look at that schedule and some of the teams they have, holy, we do know that 7-game stretch is going to be absolutely critical. And last thing, over that 7-game stretch, Sean Couturier cannot be playing 12 minutes a night. Can't. You have to get more out of him. This period of him playing 12 minutes and on the 4th line, they will not survive that 7-game stretch going against Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Nylander, and Tavares 2 times. They will not survive 2 games against Boston going against Marchand, Pasternak, and that crew. You won't survive it. You will not survive that going against Carolina and Sebastian Aho and Svechnikov and all the weapons they have. You will not survive it going against Florida and Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov and the Rangers. They got to get him back to playing more. Hopefully this is just a short period of time. He only played 12:07 last night. This team will need Sean Couturier during that chunk of 7 games, and maybe that's the plan. Nurse him along a little bit right now. Let him kind of get a reboot on a season, re-energize it, not overtax him, so that during that 7 games and beyond, he can be back up to playing 16, 18 minutes. Doesn't need to play 21. Don't need to go crazy, but he's got to be in a much more prominent role to roll through those 7 teams and have success. That's just the fact of the matter. I don't see it any other way. I'd argue that's a hill I would die on. I just don't think you can survive it with Sean Couturier playing 12 minutes and on your 4th line. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. So we'll see where it goes. Huge week for the Flyers. They get a point last night. Would you like to? Damn right. And I'm a guy who goes, you only score 1 goal. You're not going to win many games when you only score 1 goal. Trust me when I tell you this. I throw around compliments to Jordan Binnington like I throw around manhole covers. I am not a fan in so many elements of his game and the way he carries himself. He was fantastic in that game last night. Fantastic. And that is not easy for me to say. All right, everybody, enjoy your Tuesday. Again, Denver Barkey will be on tomorrow's episode. Boy, he's had an amazing year. Third in the OHL in scoring. His team, London, the London Knights, are in the top spot in their division in the OHL. So join us for that conversation and much more coming up tomorrow on a brand new Flyers Daily.